Hi, this is Menachem Inkster, and we're from Lighthouse Learning Center. There's a lot of Jews out there that would like to have the opportunity to be able to learn and get exposure to Torah. And it's a very big concept on what Torah is and the application of it in our personal lives. There's a book here that we're going to be going through together called the Tanya, and it's a map. It's a map to our soul on how to engage with our faculties and how we can unite our faculties to be able to relate and connect with, divine consciousness, with, Supreme Being. A lot of times we think that we need to find mysticism in the world around us, but really mysticism is inside of us. This is a book that was composed in Eastern Europe, in Russia, in the late 1700s, and it's a book that's here to act as reminders for us of being more self-aware of what kind of faculties we have inside and what we can do with our emotions. And our emotions sometimes can feel like an obstacle towards us, but really they're a vehicle to transport us and motivate us to ascend to a higher state of being. All right, we're going to start with it. I'm going to read inside and translate and explain to the extent of my ability. This is a sent out letter to the communities. Listen to me, the author is basically saying. Just listen to me, everyone, and may Hashem bring us all to peace. It's a common statement for people to say. You can't compare how going to a therapist, for example, having an actual engagement and a relationship and be able to talk out your challenge and actually hearing from somebody versus just reading it. A person, when they're learning a book, whatever knowledge they're going to be learning, it's always going to be limited to their perception. Somebody that's wrapped up in their own trauma or in their own story of their life, anything they're going to be reading about, it's going to be coming from that limited perspective of theirs. A book isn't going to be able to open up a person like a relationship can. It's a little bit of an interesting preface to a book, right? Meaning the opening book that the Alter Rebbe here is writing in this book, the introduction is telling somebody how we know the statement that a book isn't as good as a dialogue, as a relationship. It's an interesting opening, so why is that? Up till that point, the Alter Rebbe was conducting something called Yechidus. Yechidus comes from the Hebrew word of Yechid, of oneness. It's the Alter Rebbe meeting with a chassid of his. Now, what is going on in this Yechidus? What does it represent? I'm not sure if anybody ever experienced this, but did you ever have it that you were talking to somebody else, and as you were talking to somebody else, you didn't feel like I was talking to somebody else. I was really talking to myself. But now, through there being the other here, I can actually open up and communicate in a way that I never would have been able to communicate without this other being there. That's what the Yechidus was. And it was an amazing experience for the Chassidim to be able, the disciples of the Alter Rebbe, to come and to have a very intimate, authentic, genuine, open relationship and communicating and pouring their soul out and receiving instruction and guidance and empathy from the Alter Rebbe in their path, in their relationship with Hashem. And the Alter Rebbe here is explaining how he's taking a stop to the Yechidus, obviously to the disappointment of the Chassidim. And the Alter Rebbe is providing with the Chassidim that even though that we won't be able to meet each other in person, there is still going to be a message from this sefer, from this book. Let's continue. This A book can be incredibly amazing, full of wisdom, full of guidance, full of light, but it's all the time confined to the perception of the receiver. If the person's messed up, then they're going to be reading a messed up book. They're not going to see it. If If a person's in a healthy state, then they're going to see a healthy book. And the Alter is addressing that point, that he's saying it's tough. It's tough writing a book because as amazing the book is, we're still limited to how good the reader is. And if a person's in an unhealthy place because he's turning to a book for guidance, the book may not be able to do its job because the person's still going to be in a state of constriction and confusion. So we're in a dilemma here. How are we going to communicate to a person in a state of unhealthiness the healing remedy that they need when we're still relying on those unhealthy faculties of the person? What are we going to do about it? It's a tough situation, right? הנה, ספר יהיה ביניהם על פי שכל ונשבברי, אין נשב בכל נפש. כן כל הסכם עבד שבויס ואין שכל אדם, זה מספר למסער מזה, שמספר שכל חברי, כמו שבדבר צהל, גאי ברכס חכם ארזם, על 60 רבי מישראל, שאם די יסוים די מסל זה וכולי. כמו שכזה ברמן, זכרנו במחשם, פרש הסבי גם ישור, שנאמר באיש אשר רוח בי שכל, שיכול ללכת נגד, רוחי שכל אחד ואחד וכולי. The Alter is making a point here that, so, what's the solution? I'm going to write a book that's going to be very specific according to that person. Meaning that there are unique books that have been written that I'm going to write this book that because people are coming from an unhealthy or a limited kind of perspective, I'm going to therefore write a book that's going to get to them, that's going to communicate to them in their specific way. It's a great solution, right? But we're going to get on something. The challenge with that is that then this book would do really well for that person, but what about a different person? Would that person relate to that book in the same way? אלא, אפילו בספר הירא, אשר יסודוסם באי קדש מדרש, שחז"ל, שרוח השם דיברם, ולעשה לשנה ברסף קדש בכו כל אחד, וכל ששמר בכלי ישראל, פרטים הניצוץ קל שבקם, ופחוס ערך שבמינו בני ישראל, כול מזכה שברסף, והרסף היא אסון הקדש ברוך הוא, כנראה בזור הקדש, הרי זה דרך כלולוס לכל ישראל, ואף שניסנה תור לידש בכל פרטי פרטוס, וכל נפש פרטיס עם ישראל, המשורס בהרי, אין כל אדם צריך ליוס, מה כן מקום מפרטי שבתורה. Everybody is really part of a united organic existence. We're part of one united entity. And every person has their specific book that speaks to their soul. But what might speak to one person's soul may not speak to another person's soul. So it's cool. We started off with that a book's tough because a person who's reading the book may be in a limited, constrained headspace. So we need to make a book that speaks to their soul, that will open them up despite their limited faculties. But what's tough is that that book might speak and do wonders for one person, but not everybody's the same. So how are we going to find a common universal language that every person reading it will tap into that space? What are we going to do about that? והנה, אף בהלכות יסר והתר, הנגלוס לנבדינו, מצינרינו, מחליקת סונאים ואמורים, מן הקצה לקצה ממש, ואילו ולא דבר אלוקים חיים, לשם רבים, על שם מקור החיים, לנשם ישראל. הנחלקת הכלל לשלושה קווים, ימין ושמאל באמצע, שהם חסד וגור וכולי, ונשמה ששושן מבדס החסד, הנגלסן גם כן לטס כלפי חסד, להכל וכולי. כנראה וכל שכן וכל חומר, ונסתר ששם לקינו דינו דחילו ורחימו, דמלמכת וליבה דכל אחד ואחד, ופעמים שום דלי, פומה דמשע בליבי, כמו שכסף בזור קדש, הפסק נדע בשם בייל וגיימר. That's the way Torah is built. Torah is built that every person has their own limited perspective and their own approach. And it's an expounding on that same question we said earlier, that we are in a tough space. How are we going to communicate to so many different people on so many different wavelengths a uniting concept of relating to Hashem? And what does this mean, relating to Hashem? It means, we're going to end it off here, but just to tie it up into a nice little bow to take away with. The Tanya is here to guide every single Jew to their inner Eden, their inner iosis of calmness and warmth. And every person's different, every person has their challenges, and legitimately so, every person is different. So we're addressing a challenge here. And the Alter will answer that challenge soon as to how do we communicate to every single person their soul's journey and their inner truth that pertains specifically to them, but in a universal, common manner that will relate to every single person. All right, have a good day.